Hi, this is Charles with Conner Pictures. We're going to talk about depth of field in this episode, so stay tuned. All right, and we're back. So what is depth of field? Well, depth of field is the area of focus or the measurement between the closest and farthest parts of a photograph that are relatively in focus or relatively sharp. Let me explain that. All right, take a look at this. Let's say we're focusing on a flower. So there's going to be an area of focus in the front of the flower and an area of focus or distance behind the flower that is all relatively sharp. That is depth of field. That distance or that zone of focus is depth of field, okay? So there are three contributing factors to depth of field. One, you have lens opening, which is aperture. You have the focal length of the lens, and then you have focal distance. Now that means the distance you are between the subject and your camera, okay? How far away are you from the subject? So let's take a look at lens opening or aperture and go over how that affects depth of field. Okay, so lens opening or aperture. If we revert back to the first episode that I made, what is aperture? There's a part in there that shows where I'm focusing on a plant and I'm dialing up the aperture to a higher f-stop. I think it was f16 or f22. You'll notice that the picture became more dark. And I didn't adjust the shutter speed or the ISO for a reason. I wanted you to focus on aperture. But if you also noticed, the foreground and the background and the subject all started becoming more in focus or more sharp. That is called a larger depth of field. Okay? The aperture diameter was smaller, so the depth of field was larger. More of it was in focus. Now that also works in reverse. The larger the aperture or the diameter of the aperture, or the smaller the f-stop, you're going to have a shallower depth of field. You're going to have less of that picture that's in focus. Pretty simple, okay? So now let's move on to the focal length of the lens. All right, so let's go on to focal length of the lens. Now, if you have a long focal length of a lens, like a 135 millimeter lens or a 200 millimeter lens, and you're focusing on that flower, you're going to create a shallow depth of field. Okay? Now, if you brought along your 12 millimeter lens, you're going to create a large depth of field. If you notice the GoPro cameras, I think they actually run a 12 millimeter lens. You do not have to worry about focusing on anything, pretty much, for the most part. You can hold that thing pretty much anywhere and you've got everything in focus. Foreground, background, subject, everything. Okay? Same principle applies to the lenses on your DSLR. So remember, focal length. A smaller focal length lens like a 12 to 24 to 50 versus a 135 to 200 to 300 to 400, you're going to get those varying depth of fields. The smaller the focal length, the larger the depth of field. The longer the focal length, the shallower the depth of field. Pretty simple. Okay, so now let's talk about focal distance. Now that's the distance between you and the subject that you're photographing, okay? So if you're 5 feet away from the subject versus 1 foot away from the subject, that 5-foot shot that you take is going to create a larger depth of field than it would if you were 1 foot away from the subject shooting that same picture. Closer you are to the subject, the shallower the depth of field. The further away from the subject, the larger the depth of field. Okay, so let's do a recap, okay? We've got lens opening, which is aperture. We have the focal length of the lens, and then we also have the focal distance. Now all three of these contributing factors will determine what type of depth of field you want to create in your photos. Okay? Now I recommend you go out and practice these techniques so that you can create more production value with your photography. I actually went out in the field earlier today actually, and did some myself just to prove and to show you how these techniques apply. Let's go take a look. Alright, so now that we're in the park, I'm going to focus on the focal length of the lens first. Now if you see, my camera is about, I guess, 10 to 12 feet away from this waterfall that's not being used anymore. And I brought along a 50mm lens and a 70 to 200mm lens. I'm going to shoot this at an f2.8 and we'll see where it goes from there. Let's take a look at this video that I set aside for you. Alright, now looking here, I've got my aperture at f2.8. I'm using the 50mm lens. Yes, I am. There it is. Okay. And once again, like I said, I'm about 12 to 15 feet away from this. Okay. Also, yes, I am in manual mode. That's what I like to shoot in. If you'll notice that the depth of field is pretty large. I mean, it's not the greatest in the world, but it's definitely a lot larger than what you're about to see with this next lens that I'm shooting here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take a picture. Alright, as you can see here, this was straight out of the camera. Fairly large depth of field. Okay. Okay, so let's go on to the 70 to 200mm lens. I am still at f2.8 as I just showed you. And for verification, there's the 70-200, 70 to 200. Alright, and I'm going to shoot this at 105mm, as I'm showing you right here. Same distance away, 12 to 15 feet, f2.8, 105mm. As you can tell, it's a very shallow depth of field. Even the outer edges of the water fountain are not very sharp. The background is very blurred out. I'm going to go ahead and take a picture of this. And there you go. So focal length definitely makes a difference in the depth of field that you can acquire. Alright, so now let's go on to the focal distance. Now I am same distance, 12 to 15 feet away. I'm using a 50mm lens. And we're going to focus on this waterfall once again. Now I'm using an aperture again of f2.8. And there for verification is the 50mm lens that I'm using. Still in manual mode. Alright, well there again you have that large depth of field. And there again you have a nice photograph with pretty much mostly everything in focus. It's not like using a 12mm lens or a 28mm lens or anything like that. Now I've moved my tripod really close. I am probably 3 to 4 feet away from this water fountain. Still using the 50mm lens. And I am going to keep that same aperture at f2.8. There again, just letting you know that that is a 50mm lens. Focus in on the water fountain. Excuse me. And as you can tell, it's a very shallow depth of field. The outer edges of the waterfall are not in focus. Only a small portion of the center. And there you have it, straight out of the camera. So, the focal distance does play a fact in the type of depth of field you can acquire, just like the focal length of the lens. Alright, so now we're going to go on to aperture, or the lens opening, and see what kind of differences we get there. Alright, so now we're using the same 50mm lens, and I am probably about 5 to 6 feet away. I'm going to shoot this at an f1.8. And as you can see, I have a very shallow depth of field. The background is blurred, even some of the foreground, some of the edges of the water fountain. Mainly a little bit of the area in the center is the only thing that's in focus. Now as you see, it's getting darker as I'm raising the aperture to f16. That's the highest this lens will go. I'm going to make some adjustments here to the shutter speed. And as you can already tell in the viewfinder here that you have a very large depth of field going on right now. Everything is pretty much in focus. Now I'm going to take a shot of this and we'll see what happens. Right, and there you have it, a large depth of field. Alright, so now that we've watched some of the techniques in the field, I've gone over the contributing factors and how they affect depth of field. I hope you have a better understanding about what depth of field actually is and how you can apply it to your photography. Taking the first episode about what is aperture and now the depth of field, I hope this will add more production value to your work. The next episode, we're going to talk about shutter speed. Stay tuned. Whoa, wait guys, one last thing. If you're looking for music to put in your YouTube videos or any other type of production work that you're doing, I recommend checking out audiosocket.com. That's www.audiosocket.com. I just found this site 2 days ago and I was blown away how inexpensive the music was on this site, and they have every type of genre you're looking for. So check them out. I promise you won't be disappointed.